I sat across from a student recently regarding a paper he had submitted for my ethics class. On the surface, the work was impeccable. Perfect grammar, logical structure, and sophisticated arguments. But when I pointed to a specific paragraph about moral culpability and asked him to expand on his thought process, the room went silent. He didn't panic, and he didn't try to bluff. Instead, he leaned in and started reading the text with a look of genuine curiosity, as if he were seeing the words for the very first time. Because he was. He hadn't written it. He had prompted it. He had skimmed the AI's output and hit submit, viewing the assignment not as a chance to learn, but as a bureaucratic hurdle to clear with maximum efficiency. But what struck me most wasn't the academic dishonesty. It was his complete lack of concern about his own understanding. He was drowning in a class of 300 people, surrounded by information he couldn't verify, using a tool he trusted blindly. That moment of blank staring perfectly encapsulates a much larger, more terrifying crisis. It isn't just education failing. It's a collision of 5 distinct systems: our information supply, our schools, our government, our professional mentoring, and our reliance on AI all beginning to fracture at the exact same time. We aren't just getting lazier. We are witnessing a systemic, accelerating slide into total ignorance.
That is a chilling story, because that blank stare you described, it highlights this fundamental breakdown. The very systems that were designed to create understanding, education, the media, they're now, it seems, actively facilitating a profound lack of actual knowledge.
Exactly. It's a total inversion.
It is. I mean, when someone can produce these really sophisticated arguments that they don't even comprehend, the output is, it's completely decoupled from human capital, from actual skill.
Right. We're mistaking the performance for competence.
And the gap between those two things, that's where the danger lies. The consequences are, frankly, terrifying.
I completely agree. And that's really why this deep dive feels so crucial right now. This isn't just another conversation about, the new shiny tech. It's about institutional failure. It's about human frailty. So our mission today is to really unpack the evidence across these 5 fracturing areas. We need to get past the headlines and really look at the systemic crisis, from the sheer volume of low-quality synthetic media that's polluting our digital spaces to the quiet decay of foundational skills in our workplaces and in our schools.
And how they all feed into each other. It's a synergistic decay, as you said.
It is. And there's no better place to start than at the source of the flood itself, the pollution of our information supply, or as it's now being called, AI slop.
A very fitting name.
So we've all run into generative AI by now, probably whether we realize it or not. But this term, AI slop, it feels definitive and pretty unflattering.
Well, it's more than just a descriptor. It's really a critique. It has this distinctly pejorative connotation, that separates it from genuine AI innovation.
Right. So what's the definition we're working with? What makes something slop?
Slop is basically any digital content made with generative AI that's characterized by an overwhelming volume, a noticeable lack of effort or quality, and really no deeper human meaning. It's digital clutter.
So, okay, if spam is unsolicited junk mail, then slop is low-quality, synthetically made junk that's designed to look just legitimate enough to get you to click on it.
That's a perfect way to put it. I've heard it called filler content, prioritizing speed and quantity over substance and quality. And that's really the core economic driver behind it.
It's an extreme value shift. Volume completely crushes value.
It does. There's a philosopher, Jonathan Gilmour, who described this material as having an incredibly banal, realistic style.
Banal. That's a great word for it.
It's engineered to be frictionless. It takes almost zero cognitive effort from you, the viewer, to process it. It's not content for thought or insight. It's purely for easy consumption, to be optimized against an algorithm.
So why slop? I mean, I've heard other terms floated like AI dross or AI pollution. Why did slop stick?
I think because it's so visceral. Slop makes you think of, cheap, mass-produced, undifferentiated animal feed.
Ah, right. Low nutritional value, high volume.
Exactly. It's the polar opposite of something that's bespoke or high quality. The term got traction really fast in the early 2020s. You saw it first on places like 4chan, Hacker News, YouTube.
The canaries in the coal mine.
Right. The people who were seeing this sudden, overwhelming flood of just low-grade text and images right after the big models were released in 2022, it perfectly captures that sense of revulsion. Easy to make, but just awful to consume.
And as soon as you have high volume and low cost, the conversation immediately turns to monetization. AI slop seems inextricably tied to the creator economy and online ads. If it gets a click, it makes a penny, quality be damned.
That's the engine. It's a form of synthetic media that is engineered for one thing and one thing only: to maximize engagement metrics. And, maximizing engagement often means maximizing the bizarre or the controversial.
Which brings us to Shrimp Jesus.
Shrimp Jesus.
With this absurdity in full flight, with things like the AI-generated images of Jesus made of shrimp all over Facebook. It's hard to take seriously, but it is incredibly effective.
It's effective because it's bizarre. It generates a primal reaction, confusion, maybe humor, maybe outrage, but all of that translates into comments and shares.
It's content optimized for provocation, not for meaning.
Exactly. The goal is friction, not coherence. And the way it's made is it's startlingly simple. There was a report about a creator in Kenya who just openly admitted his process.
Right, I saw that. He gave ChatGPT these prompts that were, you have to quote it verbatim.
The prompt was, and this is a direct quote, "Write me 10 prompt picture of Jesus, which will bring high engagement on Facebook," with the typo and everything.
And then he just feeds that right into Midjourney or another image model.
Yep. It's industrialized viral content production. It's been reduced to just a few seconds of input.
And that industrial process, speed over verification, that leads straight to dangerous misinformation. It crosses a line from just being annoying clutter to something much worse.
To actual information warfare. Think about the fake historical photos that have been circulated.
Oh, the ones of Holocaust victims.
Yes, AI-generated images of victims with completely fabricated backstories attached to them. The disrespect, the danger of that was so extreme that the Auschwitz Memorial Museum had to issue a statement. They called it a dangerous distortion of history.
To use that kind of tragedy for engagement is just, it's appalling. And we see the same deceptive mechanics in, of all places, online retail.
The flowers, right?
Yeah. Sellers using these beautiful, convincing AI images of flowers that don't exist in nature. They can't exist. And they're selling the seeds to people who don't know any better.
And this erosion of authenticity is hitting even these, really niche, supportive online communities. I was reading about houseplant groups. People are there for genuine advice. And now they're just getting flooded with AI-generated plant care misinformation from bots.
So what do?
Many of them have just banned AI content entirely. They have to, just to maintain a baseline of trustworthy information. And that really speaks to the overwhelming volume and the low barrier to entry for this stuff.
You also mentioned that some of this bizarre quality might come from translation errors.
Yes, there's a hypothesis that some of the creators, the ones who are just churning this out for volume, are using prompts in languages that aren't as well supported by the models, Hindi, Urdu, Vietnamese.
And the model's internal translation messes it up.
It can, yeah. The translations can be erratic or sensational, and that can lead to even more provocative, clickbaity output. It's this weird feedback loop where a linguistic bug actually creates more effective viral content.
So if the content is cheap, fast, and emotionally provocative, it's basically the perfect weapon for political messaging.
It's the perfect fodder. And in the US, we've seen AI slop become really strongly associated with political shitposting and content farming, especially on the right.
Because it's on-demand fodder. It's cheap, it's fast, it's meant purely for engagement, and the sheer volume makes it almost impossible to counter.
And this reliance on synthetic, hyperbolic imagery has become a defining feature for some political figures. Some observers have already called one candidate the first AI slop president.
Right, because of the frequent use of AI images on official accounts, depicting him as, the Pope, a Jedi?
A Jedi, a muscular man, a fighter pilot, wildly idealized hypermasculine heroic poses.
The goal is pure image manipulation. It's about setting a narrative instantly, completely bypassing any traditional media filters. We saw it with those AI-generated images of Swifties for Trump, or the one that looked like Taylor Swift was endorsing his campaign.
And those originated from conservative accounts, designed purely to confuse people, to manipulate perception, and to drive this explosive engagement through shock value.
And the really scary part is that the power of these images persists even after they're proven to be false.
The utility of the image as propaganda just completely outweighs its truth value for some people. We saw this in a horrifying way during Hurricane Helene.
The image of the little girl in the floodwaters.
Yes, a fake AI image of a young girl holding a puppy in a flood. It was immediately circulated by Republican influencers to attack the sitting president's disaster response. And some activists admitted they were sharing it even when they knew it was AI generated. They basically said, even if it's fake, the message it delivers is useful to us.
That decoupling of truth from utility. That has to be the most terrifying outcome for any kind of civic discourse. I mean, if people decide they just prefer useful lies, why would anyone bother seeking the truth at all?
It just normalizes a kind of synthetic political theater. We saw the Sora AI model used to create these slop videos of so-called welfare queens complaining or rioting during a government shutdown.
The intent there is completely unambiguous. It's pushing a narrative of widespread welfare fraud using emotionally loaded fiction.
And the viewer response is what's really disturbing. You look at the comments, and people were either totally fooled or, and this is a critical part, they accepted it as useful propaganda for their side, even if they suspected it wasn't real.
There are other examples too, right? Some pretty aggressive ones.
Oh, yes. Highly graphic videos, like one showing a presidential figure flying a fighter jet and releasing feces on demonstrators. Just pure synthetic shock content designed to polarize.
And this isn't just staying on social media. It's actually seeping into official government documents. You mentioned a report from a Trump administration commission on children's health.
I did. That report allegedly cited these garbled, completely non-existent references that were almost certainly generated by an AI. And when synthetic content infiltrates official documentation, it threatens the very integrity of public records and policymaking. If we can't trust the sources in a government report, I mean, where does the erosion of credibility actually stop?
And this is happening globally. It's a tool for state-level disruption.
Absolutely. Foreign governments, specifically Russia and China, are actively using AI slop for propaganda. They create what's called spamouflage content. They build these networks of fake influencers who focus on divisive topics in the US and Europe just to sow chaos.
And it gets used in active conflicts, too.
Yes. During the Gaza war, AI media was used deliberately to exaggerate support for both sides. Propagandists used fake images of suffering civilians, but they often focused on damaged buildings instead of wounded people.
Why that specifically?
To get around content restrictions against showing gore, while still trying to evoke the maximum amount of sympathy. It's a full-spectrum information war being waged with mass-produced synthetic material, all designed to undermine our shared reality.
Okay, so we've established the information supply is just saturated with this low-quality, weaponizable slop. And this flood is hitting us at the exact moment when our trust in the very systems designed to process and verify that information, our institutions, is already at a historical low. This is that second fracturing system.
And this crisis of trust in American democracy, it isn't something that just happened overnight. It's been compounding for decades. Survey after survey shows the structural decline across almost every major institution. Government, media, big business, NGOs, you name it.
The numbers are pretty startling. Trust in the U.S. government to do what is right. In 1964, it was at 74%. A huge majority of Americans trusted the government.
74%.
And now, for the last decade, that number has been stuck below 25%.
It's a jaw-dropping reversal. But can I challenge that 1964 number for a second?
Please do.
Was 74% trust ever a realistic or even a healthy baseline for a diverse, pluralistic democracy? I mean, that era, the mid-60s, was defined by a Cold War consensus and, let's be honest, much less critical and diverse media environment. So maybe that high trust represented a level of sort of unquestioning homogeneity that we shouldn't actually be striving to return to.
That's a really crucial point. Maybe the goal isn't 74% trust, but a more functional, say, 50% trust that's based on real transparency and accountability, not blind obedience. But regardless, getting below 25% suggests a profound dysfunction. It points to what's been called a crisis in believability.
Precisely. The core issue is that we can't agree on basic facts anymore. Unwelcome facts are just labeled fake by people who find them inconvenient. And now technology is pouring gasoline on that fire with tools like deepfakes, which can create these convincingly realistic fake videos and audio. The average person is they're fundamentally disoriented. You can't even trust what your own senses are telling you.
So what are the deeper roots driving this, beyond just the shock of the new technology? Well, the collapse of trust is tied to these big structural societal factors. We have severe political polarization. The ideological gap between the parties has been widening since the mid-90s. When political leaders can't agree on shared realities, why would we expect voters to?
And economics has to be a massive piece of this puzzle, right?
Oh, absolutely. Rising economic inequality is often cited as the strongest determinant of trust. If you feel powerless, if you perceive the system as structurally unfair, especially when economic mobility is declining, you're naturally going to distrust the powerful institutions, government, big business that run that system.
When the system feels rigged, trust just evaporates.
Exactly. And that perception fuels political instability and cynicism.
So you have the structural distrust, and it's meeting this massive technological disruption. The media environment feels like a perfect storm. You have broadband, mobile, social media driving this exponential connectivity. But at the same time, local news is collapsing and political polarization is intensifying.
And the irony is that the sheer number of information sources hasn't led to a better informed public. In many ways, it's done the opposite. The data shows that for 58% of Americans, the increase in information actually makes it harder to feel well-informed.
That's a staggering statistic.
It is. Only 41% of people feel confident in their ability to navigate the news and figure out what's actually true. It's just overwhelming.
And this is where the sociological impact really hits home. When the cognitive cost of finding the truth gets too high, people they stop paying it. Which brings us to this idea of misinformation fatigue, MF.
Misinformation fatigue is a really crucial concept here. It describes the mental exhaustion that comes from being constantly exposed to this deluge of false or contradictory information. It generates measurable stress, mental exhaustion, sadness, anger. It's a psychological tax on just trying to stay informed.
So how does that psychological tax affect people's actual behavior, their civic behavior?
The biggest impact is that this fatigue leads to a measurable decrease in people's motivation to correct false information online. Users literally report that the process is just too tiring. They don't have the energy to argue with trolls or debate in the comments, or even just to internally fact-check every shocking thing they see.
So instead of being soldiers in the information war, they retreat, they withdraw from the fight.
It's self-preservation. People cope by cycling between trying to verify things and then just actively disengaging. They unfollow, they mute, they aggressively filter out people who post draining or offensive content.
And while that's understandable for an individual on a mass scale, it just reinforces polarization.
Exactly. People retreat into the safety and the predictability of their echo chambers to filter out conflicting information. It solidifies their own ideological silos.
It's just a profound irony, isn't it? The internet was sold to us as this tool for liberation.
Yeah.
But the scale and speed of online media means that old saying, a lie gets halfway around the world before the truth puts on its boots, is more true now than ever before. It just exacerbates the cynicism and leads to this deep intellectual disorientation.
And to really understand why this is happening systemically, you have to look at the business model. Social networks run on an attention economy. They are not optimizing for your civic health. They are optimizing for one thing: maximum time spent on their platform.
Which translates to maximum ad revenue.
Correct. And we all know what maximizes engagement.
Emotional extremes.
Exactly. This profit-driven model inherently incentivizes the promotion of emotionally charged, sensational, provocative content, whether it's true or false, because that's what generates the highest levels of interaction. The algorithm rewards provocation. It's the perfect environment for AI slop to thrive in.
And this same mechanism is what drives the filter bubbles in the echo chambers, right? Showing users content that's specifically tailored to reinforce what they already believe.
That personalization isolates users from different perspectives. It fragments the public into these separate ideological silos. Confirmation bias kicks in. People gravitate toward information that confirms their worldview, and they actively disengage from anything that challenges it, especially when they're already suffering from misinformation fatigue. It makes rational public discourse on shared problems, well, almost impossible.
And we should probably pause here to make that key distinction between the different kinds of false information out there.
Yes, that's vital. We need to distinguish between misinformation, which is false information shared unintentionally without meaning to cause harm.
Like my aunt sharing a fake remedy on Facebook because she thinks it'll help people.
Exactly. And then there's disinformation, which is false information knowingly and specifically shared to cause harm, whether it's political, financial, or social. And foreign actors like Russia and China intentionally exploit the vulnerabilities of these platforms with disinformation. Their strategic goal isn't always to convince you of a specific lie. Sometimes it's just to sow so much mistrust and confusion that you lose confidence in all authentic sources and institutions. It accelerates the very institutional decay we've been talking about.
So we have a polluted information environment, we have decaying institutions. Now we need to turn to the third and fourth fracturing systems, which are all about human capital. It's the quiet erosion of skills in the professional world and the foundational decay in our education and civic literacy.
We're really analyzing this long-term corporate human capital deficit that's being created by prioritizing short-term AI-driven productivity gains. We're talking about skill erosion or de-skilling. It's an immediate win on the balance sheet, followed by a latent and potentially catastrophic loss of professional competence down the line.
You know, the promise of automation has always been so noble. Free humans from the tedious stuff so they can do higher thoughts. An accountant should be analyzing data strategy, not manually keying in invoices.
But that's where the paradox of automation comes in. We often forget that engaging with the details, even the tedious manual work, provides this necessary immersion. That's how you gain deep insights into a business process. It's not just menial labor, it's domain knowledge acquisition. You're seeing edge cases, identifying common errors, understanding the flow of data. When you automate a task, that immersion just stops, and those foundational skills quietly erode.
And there was a striking study that really demonstrated this, right? The one about the accounting firm?
Yes, that 2023 study found that staff awareness and competence eroded incredibly quickly after they started relying heavily on an automated system. The staff became complacent, they lost the ability to critically assess the outputs. The system was just a black box that spat out results, but they no longer understood the underlying accounting principles or the data's logic.
So what happened when they took the tool away?
The employees couldn't perform core accounting tasks anymore. Their fundamental professional ability, the very domain knowledge they were hired for, was just gone. They had outsourced their cognitive effort to the machine.
And generative AI seems to present an even more insidious threat to acquiring skills because it feels like a partner. It doesn't just automate a repetitive task, it generates complex, creative, or analytical output. That encourages a much deeper level of complacency.
It creates what some are calling the prompt engineering trap. When employees, especially junior ones, just rely on pre-validated prompts or pre-generated content, they stop actively and originally engaging with the intellectual demands of the task. If you're not continuously applying and wrestling with your skills, if you're just evaluating what a machine puts out, it's atrophy. You become a critic, not a creator. The feedback loop of skill development is broken.
And if that human foundation isn't solid, then when the tool inevitably changes or fails, the result is catastrophic.
That's the model instability risk. Complacency becomes a huge financial or operational risk when the underlying Gen AI model inevitably changes, like a forced update from GPT-4 to GPT-5, or when the code it generates suddenly breaks. Employees who don't have those foundational skills can't diagnose the failure. They can't fix it because they never learned the mechanics of the process in the first place. The whole corporate function just grinds to a halt.
This has to be particularly damaging for junior employees. They're supposed to be in their apprenticeship phase, and they're already suffering from a lack of traditional mentoring.
Absolutely. They have fewer opportunities to learn on the job, to immerse themselves in the work context. If their main job is just to assess or lightly tweak AI outputs instead of wrestling with the core challenges themselves, they never build that essential domain knowledge. They don't develop critical thinking or pattern recognition. This creates a systemic deficit in your next generation of leaders and technical experts. Analyzing that long-term human capital deficit is absolutely vital for organizations.
So what's the fix? How do organizations mitigate this? How do you make sure humans stay competent, even when automation is providing this huge boost?
Organizations have to enforce these rigorous organizational and technical control points. These are checks designed to force continued human competency. For example, you might have recurrent workshops where employees have to solve complex cases completely free of automation. Or you build dedicated training environments that simulate core tasks without any AI assistance. The key is mandatory, continuous, automation-free practice. It keeps that foundational domain knowledge alive.
So this erosion of professional skills is being mirrored by an alarming decline in civic knowledge in the classroom. This is the fifth and, you could argue, the most dangerous fracturing system, because it directly undermines our ability to govern ourselves.
The loss of faith in a shared truth is deeply underpinned by this profound crisis of citizenship and a crisis in civic education. A lot of Americans just lack the basic civic knowledge that's critical for democratic processes. Data from 2014 showed that fewer than a quarter of 8th grade students were proficient in civics. If you don't know how the system works, you are completely ill-equipped to participate in it, let alone defend it.
And this deficit is happening at the exact moment that citizens are being plunged into this complex, often malicious digital information environment. We're just failing to equip them with what are being called the new literacies.
This is an undeclared and underappreciated crisis. The research shows this alarming, widespread inability, even among college students, to distinguish between basic content types: news versus opinion, news versus advertising, real news versus intentional disinformation. If citizens can't carry out that basic civic responsibility of accurately informing themselves, they can't function as knowledgeable voters. They become incredibly easy targets for all that political slop we talked about earlier.
That sounds like a complete failure of the educational infrastructure to adapt to the digital age.
It is. The situation demands proactive intervention. We need to integrate educational mandates with this digital reality. Recommendation 8 from the reports calls on state and local authorities to create a comprehensive plan for revitalizing civic and 21st century literacies. That includes information, digital, news, and media literacy as urgent requirements.
What are the specific benchmarks being proposed for this kind of literacy?
The goals are tied directly to age and digital maturity. The first key goal is that every child should get a basic understanding of digital media and safety. Understanding spam, hoaxes, basic media consumption before they hit the legal social media age of 13. They need to understand the concept of synthetic content and algorithmic manipulation before they're fully immersed in it.
And the second goal is aimed at the voting age.
Exactly. Before you reach the legal voting age of 18, you must be digitally and civically literate. That means being able to critically find, evaluate, and synthesize complex information so you can be a knowledgeable participating voter. This is the human capital that's required to counter the systemic manipulation we've been discussing.
And any effort to revitalize civics has to walk a very, very fine line, I would imagine.
An incredibly fine line. The challenge is immense. You have to encourage genuine civic pride and understanding of democratic processes without letting the education devolve into state-sponsored propaganda. Restraint, presenting balanced historical perspectives, and teaching critical analysis are paramount. You have to avoid creating a new system of indoctrination. And this is where you see that synergistic decay model in full effect. AI-driven misinformation makes the educational decline worse, which leads to a populace that is both ill-equipped to spot falsehoods and highly susceptible to political manipulation.
Okay, we have laid out a crisis where information, institutions, professional skill, and civic knowledge are all collapsing at the same time. It's an overwhelming, interconnected problem. If we're looking for a way out of this, we need a guiding philosophy, a compass for renewal.
The sources really affirm that the path forward has to be guided by 5 core values: responsibility, transparency, diversity, innovation, and a commitment to the greater good. And ultimately, resolving this requires citizens to recognize their essential role as citizen sovereigns, to take responsibility for their own knowledge and their own participation.
One of the most radical proposals for structural reform is to legally mandate that tech companies and online services become what are called information fiduciaries. Let's really unpack what that legal framework would mean.
This proposal comes from recognizing that these platforms aggregate huge amounts of sensitive user data, but their legal relationship with users is, well, it's tenuous and often exploitative. Unlike your doctor or your lawyer, who legally have to act in your best interest, tech companies face minimal legal constraints on exploiting their users. Imposing fiduciary duties would legally obligate them to act in a trustworthy way to protect your interests and your data.
That would shift the legal and ethical baseline dramatically. What are the 3 specific duties this would impose, and how would they change current practices?
The 3 key duties mirror those in traditional professional relationships. First is the duty of care. They have to securely store your data and critically immediately inform you of any breach or compromise. It strengthens accountability.
Okay. And the second one, the duty of loyalty, seems like it would be the most disruptive to the current business model.
It is the most challenging by far for the attention economy. The duty of loyalty says they cannot use user data for their own benefit in ways that compromise user interests. And that raises this massive question. How does this regulate their algorithms? If a platform optimizes its feed to maximize ad revenue by showing me emotionally polarizing content that harms my psychological health or encourages civic irresponsibility, that would violate the duty of loyalty. It means they can't monetize your data or your attention in a way that causes you financial, physical, or privacy-based harm.
That seems almost impossible to implement without fundamentally restructuring how every major social network makes money.
It does, but that's really the point. It demands that the underlying business model be aligned with user well-being instead of being inherently adversarial to it. The third duty is the duty of confidentiality. They can only transfer your data to other entities if those entities are contractually bound to the exact same fiduciary duties. The whole framework is meant to protect your control over your own identity and information. The big challenge is legally defining harm and user interest in a way that's actionable in court.
Meanwhile, the traditional information gatekeepers journalism also have to revolutionize their practices to counter this collapse in public trust. It fell from 72% in 1976 to 41% in 2018. The proposed solution is something called radical transparency.
Radical transparency demands that journalists disclose the operational context of their work. This goes way beyond just printing corrections. It means opening up the black box of editorial decision-making, revealing the business infrastructure, clarifying their funding sources. The idea is that transparency holds news organizations accountable, encourages higher standards, and helps the audience understand how the sausage is made, so to speak.
And a huge source of distrust has been that blurring of the lines between factual reporting and just commentary or partisan opinion.
That absolutely has to be fixed. Best practices would require clearly labeling opinion and partisan commentary so they're unequivocally distinct from straight news reporting. News organizations need to update their guidelines on corrections, on fact-checking, on using anonymous sources, explaining the informant's motive so the audience can gauge credibility. The recommendation also explicitly urges journalists to emphasize evidence-based commentary over partisan opinion and, crucially, to stick to the facts of their reporting when they're on their own social media accounts, rather than acting as partisan commentators online.
And we can't ignore the systemic issue of local news just dying out, which creates these news deserts and allows slop and hyper-partisan national narratives to fill that void.
The market alone is not going to be sufficient to sustain quality local journalism. The Commission strongly advocates for more support, especially from philanthropy and nonprofits, to rebuild local journalism. This means creating more community news organizations, or CNOs, and encouraging for-profit outlets to convert to public benefit corporations, or PBCs. Converting to a PBC signals that their goal is more than just pure profit, allowing them to invest in quality reporting that serves their communities. Collaboration between journalism entities is also crucial to amplify local issues and share resources.
So if the underlying technology is accelerating this democratic decay, then innovation has to be explicitly targeted at strengthening democracy. What does that look like in the tech world, beyond just the fiduciary requirement?
Innovation is needed in three critical areas. First, we have to move beyond simple engagement metrics, like clicks and shares, and develop rigorous metrics for measuring the health of online dialogue. At the same time, we need to create new technical techniques to actively discourage the spread of disinformation. The research shows falsehoods diffuse significantly farther and faster than the truth, especially with political news. We need tools designed to slow down the speed of misinformation.
And what about the platform consolidation? The fact that a few companies have so much power limiting user choice.
This is about tackling the technical barrier of network effects. We need to mandate and provide for data portability between social networks. Existing networks benefit because that's where all your friends already are, but by establishing a legal right for you to own your own data and your social graph, the map of your online relationships, it becomes technologically easier for new, competing social networks to emerge.
The big barrier there seems to be political will.
It is. The legal challenge is defining ownership, but the political will to enforce that kind of interoperability is the real hurdle.
Finally, addressing the deep polarization that drives people into those ideological cocoons, that requires action beyond the digital world. We have to physically restore constructive dialogue.
That's recommendation 9, which is all about civic engagement. We have to intentionally create local, inclusive spaces for constructive civic dialogue, bridging political divides in person. Trusted local institutions like public libraries or community centers are the ideal places for these conversations. The goal is to help people break out of their ideological cocoons and embrace the necessary discomfort of dissent and disagreement, and teach them that disagreement doesn't have to mean disrespect. This dual approach of tech innovation and physical engagement provides a more comprehensive strategy.
We have covered a staggering amount of ground today. From the mechanics of an AI prompt producing toxic slop, to the systemic collapse of trust in the institutions we rely on, and this quiet erosion of human capital and core literacy skills.
And the key takeaway has to be the deep interdependency of all these failures. The sociological impact of this institutional decay on our individual responsibility to know things is profound. When the trusted arbiters collapse, the cognitive cost of seeking truth goes way up, and that fuels this widespread intellectual apathy, this misinformation fatigue. So that means solving this accelerating slide into total ignorance requires a simultaneous, integrated renewal in how we create knowledge, how we manage information, how we run our businesses, and how we govern ourselves. The sources affirm that the solution isn't a single map to follow, but it's a commitment to those values: responsibility, transparency, diversity, innovation, and the greater good that have to serve as our guiding compass for both institutional and individual action.